In the original Thrawn trilogy, which kicked off the expanded universe novels as most people think of them, Grand Admiral Thrawn was the commander of the Imperial forces which nearly brought the New Republic to their knees, but the books give him command of a pretty small task force, consisting of only 6 Star Destroyers along with various escorts. The simpler, out-of-universe reason for this isn't what we're going to be talking about today, but it boils down to the idea of maximalism versus minimalism in Star Wars fleets and battle sizes. Most books tend to be pretty minimalist, meaning despite the vast size of the Star Wars galaxy, there's pretty limited numbers of characters or ships involved at any given time, and conflicts which are technically galactic in scale are scaled down to have more of a personal impact a lot of the time. While we only see a few battles with a few ships in the Thrawn trilogy, they're determining the entire course of the war and the galaxy. In-universe though, this more limited view of the galaxy during the Thrawn campaign has been explained in ways which, in my opinion, really expand the world building of the period in the 30 years since the Thrawn trilogy was released. As with so many things related to the Empire's fall and splintering being explored more, this is primarily done with the Essential Guide to Warfare. One of the relevant areas for this is that the earlier books, and especially the Thrawn trilogy, don't give that much attention to whether and how badly the Empire really is fracturing. For a lot of fans, the splintering of the Empire and the various warlords are one of the defining points of the period, but the Empire of the Thrawn trilogy is fairly united, and a lot of the exploration of that fracturing comes in later sourcebooks. Thrawn is referred to as a warlord, but it's used as a proper title he's earned under the Empire at its peak, rather than as a reference to the idea that different groups are out there fighting over the Empire's scraps. According to the lore as it's developed over time, when Thrawn returned from the Unknown Regions, he joined the forces belonging to the ruling council under Ars Dangor, which is probably the closest thing you can find to representing the true central government of prior periods, originally run from Coruscant until its fall, but by the return of Thrawn it had moved north to Arinda. Thrawn was put in charge of all Imperial forces under the ruling council, and his reputation was enough to overcome at least the open hostilities of recent times. He was able to create a confederation of not just the ruling council's forces, but also those under Ardus Kane's Pentastar alignment and Dalek Krenel's Kutric hegemony, along with other more minor groups in the area. Basically, the largest remaining Imperial factions outside of the Deep Core by this period were willing to join up under Thrawn. This would make it seem like Thrawn would have far greater resources to engage in a full-scale military campaign against the New Republic. However, in reality, this was an incredibly tenuous and meek alliance. For one thing, all of these Imperial leaders were terrified of the growing strength of the New Republic, and demanded their forces primarily be kept in place to fortify their existing holdings, especially Arinda, a strategy which the Pentastar alignment had been successfully employing since Endor, so in some ways it's hard to fault that logic. Especially considering the recent campaigns which had successfully eliminated 2 of the most powerful warlords, Zinj and Teradok, either entirely in the case of Zinj, or simply forcing them to retreat to the Deep Core in the case of Teradok. Almost as importantly, each of the Imperial groups wanted to make sure their borders were protected against each other. So in practice, Thrawn's large pool of resources was shrunk by internal jealousies and divisions down to about 12 Star Destroyers to use in active campaigns, only 6 of which were deemed by Thrawn to be loyal enough to fully trust in his operations. These are the 6 which I've already covered in my first animated fleet breakdown a while back. According to the Essential Guide to Warfare, this suited Thrawn's purposes pretty well, and I think this synthesis between the minimalist and maximalist versions of the galaxy works with what we see in the trilogy itself too. We never really see Thrawn engaging in a full, open campaign against the New Republic per se. He performs a lot of hidden fate attacks, securing the loyalty of border worlds for fear of reprisals, but the damage done to the New Republic in the trilogy is always shown to be more political than military. This can be taken as softening up the Republic, galvanizing more of the Imperial forces together for a proper campaign still to come against a New Republic almost as broken as the Empire was. The Katana fleet and the cloning are held up as being hugely necessary resources, turning the tide of the war for the New Republic or the Empire, but the Empire takes nearly all 200 of these long-lost dreadnoughts. It gives him more resources for his specific operations, but it doesn't make him an overwhelming powerhouse. We see something similar with the Battle of Suez Van, where Thrawn takes stolen mole miners to board and try to capture a large force from a single shipyard, albeit unsuccessfully. He's basically able to use this small task force to try to grow his own direct forces as much as possible without pulling away from the other forces commanded by the rest of the Empire. This is probably done with the hope that as he succeeds more and more, that'll free up some of those resources as the Empire becomes more solidified. There are even some direct references to this kind of being the plan. When the Battle of Bilbringi, where Thrawn ultimately dies, happens, it turns into the final battle of the campaign. But had Thrawn been victorious, while it may not have been the final battle destroying the New Republic, it would have resulted in the deaths of Akbar and Rogue Squadron, encouraging other Imperials to join the fight more actively. Thrawn's death and the discovery of his spying tree in the Senate, named Delta Source, ended that Imperial cooperation and fractured his confederation. But Artus Kane of the Penastar alignment, who had really not committed to any fighting against the New Republic at all up until this point, insisted that he had been just about to dispatch his forces, including the Super Star Destroyer Reaper, right before word of Thrawn's death came. To me, that sounds more like when people claim they were just about to clean that, when Gordon Ramsay asked why their fridge is primarily a mold storage device on Kitchen Nightmares, but I think it's still pointing towards an Imperial unity that was being built by Thrawn's actions. Kane may have been exaggerating his willingness to participate in the campaigns after Bilbringi, but I think the sentiment was really there and that it was something that they were getting towards. Personally, I find all of this to be a good way to build on and give context to the Thrawn trilogy in this wider, more developed modern galaxy. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.